Welcome back to Mr. Silence. Tonight, we're diving into chilling, true college horror stories. Always remember, stories may sound the same, but not when I tell them. And don't forget to subscribe. It was my very first day at the university dorms. My family had just hugged me goodbye, and for the first time, I was truly alone. The room smelled of fresh paint, half empty, one side neatly filled with my belongings, the other still waiting. Hours later, the door creaked open. My new roommate finally arrived. He shuffled inside with a suitcase, shoulders hunched, eyes darting around the room. I stood up, smiling, trying to break the silence. "Hey, I'm Dan," I said, reaching out my hand. He stared at it for a long moment, almost as if he didn't know what to do. Then he laughed nervously, gave me a limp, lifeless handshake, and muttered, "Dale." That was it. No smile, no conversation, just Dale. The room fell silent again, except for the faint hum of our laptops, and already I had this sinking feeling I was stuck with him. That night, I tried to sleep, but Dale sat hunched over his laptop, the glow of the screen painting his face an unnatural blue. Midnight passed, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even shift in his chair. At nearly 3, he finally shut the laptop. I let out a quiet sigh of relief and drifted off. But only minutes later, I stirred awake. The blinds were open, moonlight creeping into the room, and there was Dale, sitting on the edge of his bed, staring directly at me, his eyes glinting faintly in the pale light. I sat up, heart pounding, and whispered, "Dale, what the hell are you doing?" He just whispered back, "Sorry," then slowly laid down again. I barely slept a wink after that. The next morning during orientation, I actually saw him again, away from our group. He was crouched in the dirt, hidden behind bushes, rubbing the bark of a tree like it was some kind of ritual. Other students whispered and laughed nervously, but all I felt was a chill. This wasn't just awkwardness. It was something stranger, something darker. That night, I came back to my dorm. My laptop was open, folders rearranged, emails I hadn't read already marked as opened. When I asked Dale if he touched it, he blurted out, "No," before I had even finished the question. Too fast, too loud, like a guilty child caught in a lie. Later that night, I woke to the sound of a zipper. Turning on my lamp, I caught Dale crouched by my bag. He froze, then said, "I think you took my toothbrush by mistake." My toothbrush, from inside my backpack. It was the closest thing to wit I'd ever heard from him, but I wasn't fooled. My belongings had been rifled through, my clothes shifted around. At that point, I knew I had to get out, and thankfully, the school had already arranged a new roommate for me the next day. I thought I was free. That Sunday night in my new room with a new roommate, I finally felt safe, until I woke to the faint sound of clicking. Not random creaks or pipes, but the sound of a doorknob turning, over and over. I tiptoed to the door and peered through the peehole, Under the hallway's nightlight glow, I saw someone's scalp bent low, fingers fumbling at the lock. My stomach dropped. I knew it was him. Dale. I dialed campus police with shaking hands. Within minutes, they arrived. Only when I opened the door did I see him clearly. Dale, in cuffs, his blank face staring at the floor as they led him away. I never saw him again. Expelled? Suspended? I'll never know. All I know is that every now and then, even years later, I still see his silhouette in the moonlight, sitting there, watching me.
It was October, my sophomore year. Me and two close friends decided to skip the usual parties and head into the campus nature preserve instead. Deep in the woods, on the far side of the lake, there was a hidden clearing where we could light a fire. Few people knew about it, and that's what made it perfect. A place far from security, far from watchful eyes. Just us, the crackling fire, and a few beers. We called it our secret spot. At first, the night was light-hearted. We laughed, tossed leaves into the flames, and joked about life. The fire danced, reflecting in the lake. But slowly, we grew quieter. My friend froze mid-laugh, his head cocked. "Shh," he whispered. And then we all heard it, the unmistakable crunch of leaves. Someone, or something, was out there. At first, we told ourselves it was nothing. Maybe a raccoon, maybe a stray student cutting through the woods. But the noises kept circling us. Slow steps, a branch snapping, then silence, then another crunch behind us. It felt like we were being hunted. None of us had the courage to call out, to ask who was there. We just sat frozen, whispering, our eyes darting into the shadows between the trees. Then it happened. Out of nowhere, a heavy tree branch flew into the clearing, crashing into the fire and scattering sparks. We jumped up in shock. My heart felt like it stopped. One of my friends bolted into the woods in blind panic, leaving me and the other frozen in place. Before we could react, another branch came flying, this one striking my friend directly in the face. He screamed, clutching his cheek. That was all it took. I grabbed him by the arm, pulled him up, and we ran for our lives. We tore through the woods, stumbling over roots, lungs burning. The only thought in my head was, "Don't look back." When we finally broke through the tree line onto the road, we collapsed, gasping for air. But the nightmare wasn't over. From the woods behind us, the sound of footsteps carried across the road. Someone had followed us. When we finally reached our dorm, our other friend was already inside, shaken but alive. We rushed to the window, looking down at the preserve. That's when we saw them. A figure pacing back and forth along the tree line. Every time headlights passed from the road, the figure slipped back into the shadows. Then they vanished into the woods for good. We never saw them again. But after that night, none of us ever returned to that clearing once the sun went down. At the time, we laughed it off over beers, trying to convince ourselves it was just a prank. But the next morning, the truth set in. Someone had followed us deep into those woods, and they weren't there to make friends.
It was my very first week at the University of Iowa. My roommate was determined to rush a fraternity, and he didn't want to go alone. I wasn't interested in pledging, but I agreed to tag along. That Thursday night, we walked across campus into the slum-like part of town where the so-called frat houses were. The house looked ordinary, run down and out of place. If it weren't for the music thundering from inside, you'd never guess it was a fraternity. I should have trusted my gut and left then. Inside, the air was suffocating. 50 guys crammed into a single room, sweat dripping from the walls, stale beer everywhere. The lighting was dim, almost yellowish, giving everyone a sickly glow. There were maybe 2 girls in the whole place, and even they looked uncomfortable. My roommate tried to mingle, but I couldn't shake the sense that something was off. Everyone gave off antisocial, strange vibes, like they were all hiding something. I was ready to leave after 20 minutes, but then one of the bigger guys cornered me. He handed me a tiny bottle, smirked, and said, "That'll get you messed up fast." I didn't want it, but his eyes lingered on me, waiting, watching, almost daring me. Against my better judgment, I took a sip. The liquid burned all the way down. He grinned. But within minutes, everything felt wrong. My vision blurred. My legs felt heavy. The room dimmed, like someone had turned a dial. The last thing I remembered was stumbling, holding the wall for balance, then blacking out. When I woke, I was lying in a pitch-black room. Music pounded faintly through the floorboards, but in here, it was suffocatingly quiet. My eyes adjusted just enough to see the outlines of a bed, a closet, and then the sound. A soft crunch, like plastic under a footstep. My blood ran cold. Somebody was in the closet. I didn't wait to find out who or what was in there. I bolted out of the room, down the stairs, and shoved past the crowd. My roommate's eyes went wide as I grabbed his arm and shouted, "We're leaving, now!" We forced our way through the door, past a circle of frat guys who barely blinked as we ran out. My head still spun, but adrenaline carried me all the way back to campus. In the car ride home, I told my roommate I'd been drugged. He wanted to call the police, but I said it was pointless. Nobody would believe us. I checked myself over. Clothes untouched. No pain. I had only been out for 10 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. Still, the thought that someone had dragged me into that room, that they were waiting in the closet, it never left me. I never went to another frat party again. And even now, the memory makes my skin crawl. That was my first frat party, and my last. Sometimes, the scariest part of college isn't the exams. It's the people you never should have trusted.
Sophomore year, I scored what I thought was the perfect dorm. It was a single, tucked away in its own little corner of the hallway. To get to my door, you had to turn a bend, which meant privacy, no constant traffic, no noise. I told myself it was the ideal place to study and finally get some peace. For the first couple weeks it was, but then the knocking started. One night while studying for a bio exam, I heard it. A faint tap at my door, so light I almost missed it. I called out, "Come in," but nothing. When I opened the door, the hall was empty. I walked the short stretch to the corner, nobody. I laughed it off, assuming it was a prank, and went back to studying. But the next night, it came again, louder, more insistent. By the third night, the knocking grew harsher. I sat up in bed debating whether to open the door. Finally, I did, heart racing. Again, nobody. But this time, I sprinted to the corner and caught a glimpse. A dark figure slipping out of sight down the far end of the hall. Adrenaline surged through me. Whoever it was, they weren't just knocking for fun. They were watching me. I decided enough was enough. The next night, when the pounding started again, I threw the door open and sprinted after them. I saw the figure vanish into the bathroom at the end of the hall. Determined, I pushed the door open hard. The light was off. My finger hovered over the switch before flicking it on. The stalls were all shut, and then I saw them. Heavy black boots under one door. Finally, I thought, I'd caught them. I took a deep breath and shoved the stall open. The stall swung open, but it was empty. Just the boots sitting there with no one in them. And then the sound. A laugh, low, wheezy, almost broken. Not the laugh of a student, not the laugh of someone young. It was old, cracked, insane. I froze in place, every instinct screaming at me to run. So I did. I sprinted back to my dorm, slammed the door, and locked it. The knocking returned one final time that night. Louder, faster, relentless. I buried myself under the sheets and prayed for it to stop. After 30 long seconds, it finally did. The next morning, I asked everyone on my floor if they'd been messing with me. Every single person swore they hadn't. Their faces told me they were serious. And that laugh, there's no way that came from one of them. That night and the boots haunt me to this day. Was it a cruel prank or something much worse? All I know is that that corner dorm never felt private again. Even now, years later, I can still hear that laugh, and sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I swear I hear the knocking too. Thanks for watching these true college horror stories. If you enjoyed them, make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more. And always remember, stories may sound the same, but not when I tell them.